Hey, what's up? It's Hillary. Welcome to my YouTube channel. In today's video, I'm going to be doing a mid-year book tag. So I'm going to be looking back over all of the books that I read from January to the end of June 2026 and sort of reflecting on some of my favorites, some standouts, and things like that. So in just a second, I am going to be going over to my bookshelves of my read books. So these are my unread books, and I have different bookshelves for my read books. I'm going to be going through those and pulling some to show. But before we get into that, I'm just going to do some overall stats for 2026 so far. Don't mind my sticky notes, but I would never be able to remember all of this. So in the first 6 months of 2026, I read 73 books, 28,088 pages, and have an average rating of 3.85, which I think that's pretty great. Anything above a 3.5 I think is really good. Like if I'm reading a book 3.5, I'm still probably having a good time reading it. It just was, it didn't blow my mind, and there were maybe some things that I wish had been a little bit different. Of the 73 books that I read, I owned 38 of them, which is a goal of mine to read the books that I own. 29 of them were new releases, and I attended 21 book club meetings, either in person or virtual, and so that averages out to 3 book club meetings a month, which is amazing. In terms of genres, I read 33 romance, 26 fantasy sci-fi, 11 that were either literary fiction or historical fiction, 2 thriller, mystery, or horror, and 1 graphic novel. When I look across the 73 books that I read, the top 5 subgenres were emotional, contemporary, funny, LGBTQIA+, and adventure. I love that. That sounds really great. I like to look across that just to kind of see like what am I reading, what am I enjoying, and that does resonate with me. I do prefer contemporary settings unless it's a fantasy, obviously, but like I'm not much of a historical person. I love when books make me feel emotions and when the characters are really going through something that you can feel and it doesn't feel fake or cliche. I also love to have a good time and to giggle and laugh, so funny makes a lot of sense. LGBTQIA+ makes a lot of sense. I love to try to find representation in my books. And then adventure. So now I'm going to go over to my bookshelves and pick out some books that we can discuss. All right, we are back and we've got a stack of books here. So I'm going to be going through some categories that I've been seeing other people put online, but then I also modified or added a few. I'm going to start with my best book of 2026 so far, and that is going to be The Ballad of Falling Dragons. This is the sequel to When the Moon Hatched. It's the second book in the Moonfall series by Sara A. Parker. This, oh my gosh, I thought Sara A. Parker did an amazing job in this book, also in When the Moon Hatched, but especially in this book, in making me feel every single emotion that the characters were supposed to be feeling. You can tell that she's an empath. She is able to verbalize and put into writing the way that emotions come across for different characters and in different situations in a way that makes it's like it comes off the page and into me. Like I felt every emotion that they were going through. I also thought that this was an amazing expansion of the world that Sara A. Parker had created. It was really excellent in getting to know each of the characters on a deeper level, falling in love with them even more or hating them even more. I immersive read this whole book, meaning I had the book in my hands and was reading it with my eyes while I was listening to the audiobook. I wouldn't have done it any other way because I truly wanted to make sure I did not miss a single thing. I wanted to absorb everything. I was underlining every mention of silver, if you know, you know, just really trying to take it all in. I also kind of took my time with this. I didn't rush it. I was a little bit worried because it's a new release and has a lot of hype around it. I was worried about seeing spoilers online if I didn't finish it quickly enough. But I finished it, I think, in 7 days, like 7 continuous days of reading it. And I was able to get through to the end without any spoilers. And I also didn't feel like I rushed it. I really felt like I sat with it. I felt fully immersed, like I was in the world while I was reading it, and gave it 5 stars. I love this book. Next, we have Best Sequel. I had a lot of options to choose from. I think this year I've been reading a lot of, I've been continuing a lot of series, and a lot of my favorite books have had sequels come out this year. So I had several contenders for this, but I actually ended up picking one that did not come out this year, but you'll understand why I picked it for 2026, and that is The Long Game by Rachel Reid. This is technically the 6th book in the Game Changers series, but I would consider it like a sequel to Heated Rivalry. This is a second installment in Shane and Ilya's love story, and this book, oh my gosh, is incredible. And I'm trying to figure out what exactly it is in Heated Rivalry and The Long Game, because I've seen a lot of people just like comparing, okay, if you liked Heated Rivalry, you'll like this, and it's really just an MM sports romance. But there's so many specific things about Shane and Ilya that I think are actually what people are looking for when they say they want to read another Heated Rivalry. In Heated Rivalry, I think part of it is the long-term yearning. I think it was over 10 years that they developed their relationship. There was also the aspect of it had to be a secret because the public thought they were rivals and wanted them to be rivals and cheered them on as rivals, and so for them to be together felt like a betrayal to the fans and the teammates and things like that, so they had to keep everything a secret. And also there were societal things happening that made them feel like they had to keep it a secret. So I think those aspects too contributed to why so many people love Heated Rivalry. And also seeing somebody like Ilya, who is normally very closed off to his emotions, feeling more and more comfortable and vulnerable with sharing his emotions and his insecurities with Shane. I think people also loved seeing that develop over time. So then in The Long Game, I'm not going to say anything that's going to be spoilery, but it was, I think, 2 years later after Heated Rivalry ended, and so they were together, and we got to see where their relationship went next. And it was just so beautiful. It wasn't all easy. You know, it wasn't just like, okay, here's the epilogue, everyone's happily ever after. They had to work for things. They were dealing with mental health struggles, even more societal struggles, and trying to figure out who they could trust with their secret, but largely being together in secret still, and the emotional toll that took on both of the characters, but particularly Ilya. It was beautiful to see them work through that, consult professionals and resources to help them get through the hard times, and ultimately see their love prevail. That's The Long Game. The next one is Biggest Surprise. So this is one that I read for one of my book clubs, Almost Life. It's a literary fiction, a sapphic love story, if you will, spanning years and years. The reason for the title is because we are sort of seeing this life that these two women almost had together. They're both going along their individual journeys, and at times their paths cross and at times their paths go separate. We see the ways that they interact with each other over time, the ways that they show love for each other, but ultimately it is an almost life. This is not a contemporary romance, this is a literary fiction, so keep that in mind with the way it may or may not end. It was a slow book, but in the way where I really felt like we were living in their lives. We saw the good, we saw the bad, we saw the boring. We really got to know these characters. We really fell in love with these characters. They felt so real, so fleshed out. I probably wouldn't have picked this book up if it hadn't been assigned for book club, and in fact I was sort of prioritizing it lower, like I had to get through other book club books first and then I got to this one, and I'm so glad I did. Plus the author joined the book club meeting, and wow, I could listen to her talk for hours. It was so beautiful to hear her and the way that she thinks about writing in general, and especially writing these characters. And, you know, we got to ask her some motivations behind certain characters' actions, and she filled us in. And it was just such an amazing call. She's so lovely. I will definitely be looking out for more books by this author in the future. I went and took a peek at her backlog, and it seems like mostly middle grade and young adult. So I think I'm gonna wait and check out anything in the future that might be more adult. The next one is Favorite New Author. Another book club book that we read was The Fox and the Devil by Kiersten White. And I loved this and have since been really curious to check out her backlog. It seems like she kind of picks famous paranormal stories and folklore and things like that and kind of spins it on its head, maybe gives it a sapphic twist. This one was kind of a twist on Van Helsing, Monster Hunter. Others of hers include Frankenstein's wife and various characters like that. So I am definitely going to be looking into her backlog to see if there might be certain ones I want to check out, because the writing in this was gorgeous. I thought the pacing was great. I don't tend to love historical, but I was fully immersed, and even doing research on my own of the setting of this book, which was Paris 1900 with the Exposition Universelle. I think maybe it's also called the World's Fair, like the Paris World's Fair. And it was such an interesting use of that as the destination, because it was such an attraction for people moving technology forward. And technology actually played a big role in this story and in the outcome of this story. And so I loved how the author chose that location, because it was a big showcase for upcoming and new technologies. And then technology actually played a big role in the story too. So I really loved that. There were many times where I was writing down quotes from the book because it was so beautiful. I loved the characters. There was great found family. So for all of these reasons, I would say that Kiersten White is definitely an author that I'm going to be looking out for going forward. Okay, next category is a book that made me cry. So there were several. I narrowed it down to two. So the first is The Invisible Life of Addie Larue. I read this book, I think, in January. It was like a 5-star right out the gate for 2026. I love this book so much, and it definitely made me cry. Addie Larue is cursed to be immortal, but to go through life never being remembered. So she'll meet someone, introduce herself, have a whole interaction with them, but the second they leave her presence and come back, it's like they don't know her, they've never met her before, and she has to go through it all over again. And so you can imagine that that makes things like having a place to stay or making money very difficult, because how do you have any kind of stable housing if your landlord literally thinks that they're meeting you for the first time every time they see you? Over the course of 300 years, we see her go through various situations and sort of dealing with this curse and learning to work with this curse. And then one day she's in New York in a bookstore, and a man says to her that he remembers her. And so we learn more about who this person is and why he might be able to remember her when no one else can. When I was reading this book, I really resonated with the feeling of invisibility. So at various points in my life, but particularly when I lived in Chicago, I often felt invisible. I felt like people didn't remember my name. I would hang out with a friend group of my friends, and people that I had met multiple times before would act like they didn't know me, and it was like they were meeting me for the first time. You know, sometimes I felt like I wasn't getting invited to things because people weren't thinking of me, things like that. And over time, reflecting back, I realized part of it part of it was that I didn't truly let anyone in. I wasn't being vulnerable or sharing things about myself. I kept things very surface level as a defense mechanism, but also like, come on, those people were a little bit of assholes, right? We've met multiple times. They should have been able to remember me. Anyways, but that is why this story resonated with me so much, and I think why it really packed a punch when we got to the end. I could relate. I can't relate with being cursed or being immortal, but I could relate with feeling invisible and then finally meeting people who make you feel like you're not after all that time. Another book that definitely made me cry this year is Score by Kennedy Ryan. In this book, we have Verity and Monk who meet in college and start dating, have a great relationship, but then Verity starts acting kind of out of the norm and this big catastrophic event happens and they split up. From there, Verity goes on her own difficult journey of discovering that she has bipolar disorder. Thankfully, she finds a therapist who takes it seriously and is actually trying to help her. And so she, throughout the course of her life is figuring out how to deal with that. I believe it's about 10 years later, they see each other again and end up working together on a biopic film and are kind of forced to face the past. Now, Monk doesn't know that she has bipolar disorder or that she even went through any of that and that contributed to the catastrophic event that split them up. And so, they have to kind of re-meet each other and it is a second chance romance. Kennedy Ryan has an author's note in the beginning that she'll never give you the hurt without the healing and that you can trust your heart with her. And I fully believe that. She did give us the hurt, but she did give us the healing too. This one made me cry and I loved it. Okay, biggest disappointment. My biggest disappointment of 2026 so far was The Will of the Many. Now, I've seen so many people who love this book, who love the series, and that's totally valid. A lot of people really like this book, so take what I'm about to say with a grain of salt. I didn't like this book because, number one, I was pretty bored being in a single POV of a 17-year-old boy, and it was like kind of like a chosen one, like he has all of these skills and is able to excel and get past all of these challenges relatively easily. I also thought the author was just trying to do way too much for this first book. There were so many plot points. It was difficult to follow like what was happening with all of them. Some of those plot points I thought didn't really make sense. Some of them were kind of wrapped up, or at least we were given more information on, and some of them we weren't. Now, it is the first book in a series, so maybe he intended to kind of build on that in the second book, but I felt like we needed just a little bit more to even understand like how are all of these different elements coming into the same story? How do they play out with each other? All of that, because otherwise it just wasn't making sense. The author is a white male, and there were barely any female characters who felt like an actual real person. They were very surface level, very stereotypical. We didn't really get any of the female characters very fleshed out. And then I've actually heard a spoiler from The Strength of the Few. I'm not going to say what it is, but I've heard a spoiler from The Strength of the Few that makes me feel even stronger that this author does not know how to write women or female characters, and maybe even doesn't think he needs to. So those are my feelings about The Will of the Many. Again, if you felt differently about it, I'm so happy for you. These are just my opinions. The most beautiful book I acquired in 2026. So I went two directions here because I wanted to show a couple that I think are so beautiful that you can just get off the shelf. Regular releases that you can find on bookstore shelves. So the first one is Into the Blue. I think it's something about the colors that I love so much, and the way that it looks like a painting. Like when you look up close, you can actually see probably where the original acrylic paint sort of like built up on each other. I think these colors are gorgeous. It makes me feel kind of calm and just have really good feelings when I look at this book. Another one that's just a regular edition is The Secret World of Maggie Gray. I think the character on the cover is gorgeous. I love the little cat. I love the use of the neon yellow. I think it's very effective and really catches my eye. Now, if we're talking special editions, I have to say the most beautiful book I've acquired in 2026 is the Arcane Society's special edition of Glow of the Everflame. I love this so much. I love that it's such intricate illustrations on both the front and the back. I love the strategic use of the gold foil. Yeah, I love everything about this. And finally, my other favorite special edition that I got is the Curve series by Danielle Allen. This one is Curvy Girl Summer, which is the first book in the series. This was done by Eternal Embers. And so we've got beautiful artwork on the cover, and then the end papers, which are a specific location in the story, but then the naked hardcover is also just gorgeous artwork. Next is the most exciting series that I started, and I'm gonna say Daggermouth, which is the first book in the, I believe it's the, is it called the Python Duology or just Daggermouth? I'm not sure, but it's supposed to be a duology. Daggermouth is the first book, and I absolutely loved it. It was so fun, so exciting. I fell in love with multiple characters. There's multiple romances, multiple POVs, a dystopian world, and I ate it up. My most anticipated release for the second half of 2026 is going to have to be Burn of the Everflame by Penn. I read Heat of the Everflame in June 2024. So by the time Burn comes out on September 8th, it will have been over 2 years since I read Heat of the Everflame. I'm not sure exactly when Heat came out, so there probably are people out there who read it even more than 2 years ago. I am so excited to see how the series concludes, everything that our characters are gonna go through. I am starting a reread of the series in July so that I can be ready and refreshed when the 4th book comes out. The next one I kind of threw in here because I thought it would be fun, like which books that I read so far in 2026 were just the most fun reading experience. And I have two. One is gonna be The Missed Connection by Tia Williams. This is a spicy rom-com. I absolutely loved it, and I just had so much fun while I was reading it. It had like your typical rom-com shenanigans, okay? She's on an international flight and is seated next to this handsome Italian man. They start talking, they hit it off, but ultimately don't end up sharing contact information, and so they get separated after the plane lands, and she can't find him. So she's trying to find out his name or something like that based on the little bit of information she got from him, and she ultimately ends up hiring a private investigator that she knew from before, and from there just rom-com shenanigans ensue, and I had so much fun. I think it's a perfect summer rom-com. Another one is The Entanglement of Rival Wizards. I love this so much. Okay, so this is one where I've seen people saying if you want heated rivalry but with wizards, read The Entanglement of Rival Wizards. And I have to say I disagree a little bit with that, because I think what people mean is that they are rival wizards. They're rivals in their academic program, but there's not like the 10 years of yearning or the like I'm struggling with my emotions but only show you. There's none of that. So when I read it, I actually thought it reminded me of a much spicier and queer version of the Very Secret Society of Irregular Witches. Like it had those cozy vibes. It had this magical backstory that you're discovering, and then also the romance, which was pretty spicy in this book. Okay, the final prompt is something that I want to make sure I read by the end of the year. And so I want to make sure I continue the Mages of the Wheel series by J.D. Evans. This is the first book, which is Reign and Ruin. I read this last year, and then I haven't picked up book 2 in the series yet, even though I do own the audiobooks, and then the book is on Kindle Unlimited. So I could very easily immersive read the rest of the series. Books 1 through 4 and a novella are already out in this series, so I would have plenty to keep myself busy. So yeah, that I want to make sure that I at least get to book 2 in this series by the end of 2026. All right, I have no idea if you can even see all of these, but this was so much fun to look back and think about all of my favorites from the year, any standouts, and go over them with you. So thank you so much for watching this video. If you liked it, please give it a thumbs up, and please consider subscribing for my channel if you're not already, so you can see all of my videos in the future. Let me know down in the comments if you've read any of these and what your favorite book of 2026 so far was. I look forward to hearing from you, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye.